Welcome back to Combat Mission Cold War. This is an AAR of the Stem the Tide scenario. I played as the hometown favorites in the red, white, and blue corner, facing off against Gavin Drago, playing the steroided Soviets in the red corner.
It's time to go to school!
You will lose.
Things started bad for the US, went to worse in a hurry, and never got any better. But before I show the details of my beatdown, I'll start with an overview of the scenario, the force selection, and the map. The US is given Alpha Company, although that name is somewhat deceptive because it is really just an understrength platoon of infantry, a platoon of tanks, and some support assets. The briefing says I should stop the advance of elements of a motorized rifle brigade, but I don't specifically know what I will be facing, since we both agreed to play the scenario blind. Here's the tactical map and the objectives. The center bridge is a touch objective, and then there are 3 other objectives on the far side of the map. The 3D map shows light forest and some gentle hills. To cross the bridge, the first piece of key terrain will be to control the town. On the left, I see a valley that should be pretty well concealed by trees. This would make for a good concealed approach to the bridge, or to set up as a base of fire for an advance on the left. On the right, there's a small group of houses that I wanted to control in order to leave open the possibility of advancing troops under cover of these trees on the right, and then possibly crossing the river in M113s. I do have some reinforcements coming. A battery of 155mm artillery at 5 minutes will be a big help, and 2 helos, which won't be much help if the Soviets have any AA assets. I also have another platoon of infantry coming, but they don't show up for 30 minutes, and spoiler, the battle was well decided by then. So we are off. I managed to avoid any major traffic jams. My initial plan is to rush an observation group to the right set of buildings. In town, I want to get to this big building here, and also to here. And on the left, I want to make it to this wooded valley. My first complaint for this scenario is the extreme lack of infantry. 1 platoon of infantry and a few engineers is just not nearly enough for the way I want to play. My favorite type of CM game is a double-blind scenario, and I'm nervous about a blurb in the briefing that says dismounted Soviet elements might be within friendly lines. That's actually somewhat confusing since this is described as a median engagement, so I don't know where the friendly lines are. But as my M113 pulls up to the right group of buildings, those forward Soviet elements ambush my M113. I attempt to pop smoke and run, but the M113 is immobilized and the crew and infantry are destroyed. It's not a good start since I certainly wasn't given enough infantry to begin with, and I could not afford to lose some in that manner. At the end of turn 1, I was surprised to see a Soviet contact on my side of the middle bridge. So for turn 2, I adjusted the rush locations for my units in the town, since with only 1 platoon of infantry, I could not afford to lose any infantry in transports. I adjust this M113 to go to this building, which has good line of sight to this field, and should be able to get a dragon into some Soviet transports. On the following turn, my infantry does get into the house, just as planned, but I should have given them an armor arc target order. They engage some Soviet infantry, which allows them to get spotted by a BMP, and they are gunned down. And this is basically a microcosm of the entire game. On the east side of town, my forward infantry spots a BMP. They fire all their laws and grenades. They do manage to score a hit, but they don't kill it. So I send the M60 forward to try to finish off the BMP, but it doesn't get a good spot, and I'm too afraid of RPGs to leave it sitting, so I pull it back. On turn 5, I pulled the M60 back even further, not wanting to lose a tank to a close-range RPG team. A couple of turns later, those infantry do manage to catch some Soviets in the open, I think this is the only thing that went right the entire game. At this point, if you're tired of hearing my belly aching, you should just turn off this video now, because it's going to get a lot worse and there is no bright spot. Over on the left, my forward scouts get to the valley I wanted them to get to. And my infantry gets unloaded and into position. I expect this to be a great ambush spot, and a BMP rolls into view of my dragon team. But then they die. That was tough to accept. Those guys were in good concealment. I have the game set to artificial brightness, and losing them eliminates all my armor killing power on this flank. So I send an M60 that was sitting in a short reserve to rush across the open ground and try to get to support of that forward position. And he actually makes it successfully. Gavin doesn't push that BMP or any infantry forward right away, so I am able to stabilize that position for the time being. Back to the left side of town, where my infantry screen was completely wiped out in turn 3. I really wanted to keep Gavin from setting up a strong position in these buildings, and I found what I thought was a good keyhole for my tanks that covered the open approach to those buildings. All game, Gavin did a really good job of obscuring my line of sight with smoke. He was smoking my view here, so I did some blind area fire, hoping to catch his infantry advancing. I ended up destroying the building that my forward M113 was hiding behind, and it was quickly dispatched by autocannon. On turn 6, I area fire suspected infantry some more. I have a forward observer on the 3rd story of this building with good line of sight to the open ground, which I expected to help spot some armor for my tanks. But I only get some sound contacts, and my M60s pull back. Turn 7, I pull back a bit more because the downside of losing tanks at this point vastly outweighs the upside of getting a kill. Eventually, Gavin wins the spotting contest. One of my M60s is panicked by autocannon. As the turn ends, a T-64 spots one of my M60s, fires, but hits a tree. So turn 8, I try to pull back the spotted tank, but it gets destroyed. I had decided to leave the other tank in position, hoping it would spot and kill the T-64 that is lighting up the dawn sky with giant muzzle flashes. But no. The end result is 2 M60s destroyed and another panicked, and things looking really bad for me. Here's another view of the turn 8 tank exchange from the Soviet side of the map.
Shot. Out. Shot. Over.
This is a good time to show an overview of the entire map. On the right, I have a one-man HQ unit and 2 basically useless M113s. On the left, I have 2 tow vehicles looking for sniping opportunities. An 81mm mortar barrage is just about to start falling here, and the 155mm artillery is in the spotting phase for a linear target here. From the icons, it might look like I have a secure grasp of the town, but I don't. I have 2 rifle squad fire teams with a combined 7 men and 1 dragon, and 2 engineering teams with a combined 6 men, and 2 tanks that so far can't spot anything. Spoiler, they never do manage to spot 1 vehicle. In the wooded valley, I have 2 teams of 6 men, but that changes quickly. On turn 9, I order the M60 to move from cover to kill the BMP by the town. It looks like he immobilized it with coaxial, which is good because the first shot hits a tree. As does the second shot. Finally, the third shot takes out the vehicle. You might have noticed my infantry dying in the previous clip. Here's a better view. 2 men from the Alpha team are hiding in the grass, and they get blasted. But what is really disturbing is that 3 of the 4 people from Bravo team also eat it from the autocannon HE that is landing 20 meters away. So now I am down to 7 riflemen and 6 engineers. This is a complete disaster. Gavin has at least 4 T-64s and those damn BMPs with their autocannon. In my desperation, I spend 3 turns sending this engineer team to grab a Dragon launcher from this M113. And then running back to get a view down the road leading into town from the Soviet side. And to my horror, Gavin rolls another platoon of tanks into view. And then 4 turns later, he rolls a 3rd platoon of tanks into view. I'm outnumbered 12 tanks to 3. I have 13 infantry soldiers. I do have 2 helos that will arrive in 13 minutes. I certainly cannot attack at this point, so it seems my only option is to hope my helos and artillery can decimate the Soviet war machine. Which brings me to another thing that frustrated me in this game. And I don't know if this is a game mechanic that I don't understand or if I was just randomly unfortunate. The linear target line for my 155mm artillery is exactly at this position. I would expect the artillery to be randomly distributed on both sides of this line, but turn after turn, 3 shells would fall, and every one of them was on the west side of the target line.
Fire perfect.
I did finally adjust the 155 and point target right at the T-64 action square. Look at the destruction around this tank. But he survived the battle. I could not even get that one small victory. My tows and dragons could not kill any tanks either. This tow hits a tree when aiming at a BMP. This tow bounces off the frontal armor and doesn't even kill the tank commander. This dragon team was ordered to attack the side of a T-64. But they can't get the missile off on time. So it targets the front of the indestructible T-64, and it fails. In fairness, that was the expected result for all those tows against T-64Bs. But it is extremely frustrating when I'm carefully maneuvering troops into position for a shot, and then with one punch, Gavin destroys me. Here's the overview at the end of turn 18. There's no activity on the right from either side, where I just have a single man HQ unit and 1 M113 as a sentry. Not much has happened in town since turn 9. I have had artillery falling that has blocked the approach for the most part, but at this point I assume that the Soviets did not have an objective in the town. The 2 US helos are still 10 minutes away, and should attack this circle. And this is my friendly Vulcan that I'm keeping out of line of sight because I assume Soviet helos will be attacking. I've been hoping that Gavin will press forward here, but instead, Gavin started to advance on my far left. So I rushed one of my 2 remaining rifle teams to an M113 and order them, and this M60, to take up position here where the tow vehicle was just destroyed. They make it to the woods on turn 20. On turn 24, the rifle team gets line of sight on a BMP, but at this time I was still trying not to completely lose, and I figured if I had any chance, I needed to destroy a T-64 with the Dragon team and have the M60 take out the BMP. So the Dragon team had a short target arc waiting for a T-64. On turn 25, some very rare good news. My remaining tow vehicle actually spots and destroys a BMP. But later on turn 25, a different BMP somehow spots my hiding riflemen in the brush in low light conditions and blasts them. On turn 26, I send the M60 to advance and look for the BMP. He doesn't find anything and pulls back. On turn 27, the M60 tries again, and he's destroyed. At the same time, my forward M60 is engaged by unseen T-64s. The M60 tries to reverse away to safety, But you guessed it, the M60 is destroyed. My helos are supposed to arrive in the next turn, so I keep going and a dragon kills a BMP. But any hope I have from my helicopters vanishes when Gavin wipes out my last rifle team with a Shilka. And then attacks one of my helos with some sort of missile. So after being completely beat down, I ask for a ceasefire. And Gavin Drago says no. So I set up a dragon team on the far side of the river from the newly arrived but understrength 2nd Infantry Platoon. And I start retreating from the town, which at this point I had no hope of holding. That went as well as everything else did. So I hit the surrender button. It still played one more turn, and I'll show, without comment, a few more scenes of my dragon teams versus T-64s.
Enemy armor sighted. Contact. Enemy tank.
It goes without saying, a total victory for Gavin Drago. Here's the in-game map. Gavin played an excellent game against me. He was constantly using smoke to obscure my positions, and he did a really good job of advancing a little, establishing line of sight and overwhelming numbers, and then destroying what he found. Then he would repeat the process. Even though I've been whining about my bad luck and being outnumbered, he started this beatdown when it was 3 M60s versus only 2 T-64s. So I have no excuses.
He dies. He dies.
At this point, Apollo is dead. The question is, can I conjure the spirit of Rocky for the rematch? Be sure to check out the battle from Gavin's point of view on his YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.